Once you start allowing voices to start spewing and changing the narratives of what our history truly is, you open the door to so many other negative voices.
Tonight, a First Nation political organization is calling on the federal government to help stop the harm caused by denying residential schools.
What I support is dialogue which balances Aboriginal rights.
Day 3 of the federal election campaign has the PM stopping in Halifax. And the U.S. Department of the Interior plans to reinstate a program aiming to open an area of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to drilling. Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. The Winnipeg Police Service is set to provide new information on Mashkode Bizhiki'ikwe, or Buffalo Woman. Winnipeg Police will hold a press conference tomorrow at 1 p.m. Manitoba time to provide the update on the investigation, but release no further details. A Winnipeg serial killer was convicted of killing 4 Indigenous women: Morgan Harris, Mercedes Myron, Rebecca Contois, and a yet-to-be-identified woman given the name Buffalo Woman. During the last 4 weeks, the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron have been located at the Prairie Green landfill north of the city of Winnipeg. Rebecca Contois' remains were discovered in May and June of 2022. But the whereabouts of Buffalo Woman, believed to be the serial killer's first victim, are unknown. APTN News will cover the news conference live on our website and the APTN News YouTube channel. A First Nation political organization is calling on the federal government to create an act to stop people from denying the harms caused by residential schools. The law would be similar to Bill C-19 that criminalized Holocaust denialism in Canada. APTN's Tina House has more.
Since the late 1800s, thousands of Indigenous children from across Canada were forcibly removed from their homes and taken to residential schools. Once there, they were starved, beaten, sexually, verbally, and physically abused. If they tried to run away, they were brought back and punished. In many cases, parents did not even know where their children were. Many children never made it back home. In 2021, the Tk'emlúps Indian Band announced that 215 anomalies suspected to be unmarked graves were found. Since then, dozens of other communities from across Canada have also come forward with their own discoveries. Despite these discoveries and testimonies from survivors, there is a small but loud group that denies that unmarked graves even exist, or that residential schools were bad for Indigenous people. Angela White says this group needs to be educated and held accountable.
Once you start allowing voices to start spewing and changing the narratives of what our history truly is, you open the door to so many other negative voices that can just instill themselves and start changing those narratives.
White points to a recent video that shows BC Conservative MLA Dallas Brody mocking residential school survivors and claiming there are no unmarked graves.
I do know that if we don't have truth, not his truth, her truth, my grandmother's truth, or this whole thing about my truth and your truth, my truth. This stuff has to stop. It's like, it's got to be the truth.
She wants people to shut up the survivors because their truth isn't worth anything in her eyes. That's, I think, really where what survivors are really talking about is enough is enough. Like the strong ones are coming forward and saying, this is my truth and I'm going to stick to it.
Hugh Breaker is with the First Nations Leadership Council, which is comprised of political leaders from across BC. They are calling on the federal government to enact legislation that would stop residential school denialism.
To me, it's sort of like an added insult to the people who suffered in residential school. It's like you're hitting them over the head again. These people put up with so much in their life, and now they're having to be called a liar.
Breaker has a message for anyone who denies residential schools were a dark part of Canada's history.
You've got to stop this because you're hurting people. You're hurting a lot of people, and you're making it difficult for us to bring up our children in a proper way, to make them proud of who they are.
Dallas Brody was kicked out of the Conservative Party after her comments went viral. Our request for an interview with her was not granted by the time this story went to air. Tina House, APTN National News, Vancouver.
The Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations in Saskatchewan wants to know why a 17-year-old girl who died by suicide in the fall of 2023 in a shelter run by a community organization in Regina. It happened at the Tuxinoan Shelter, a 15-bed facility for youth ages 16 to 18, run by the Street Culture Project. According to some staff members, the young woman said she was having suicidal thoughts, but did not receive care for that. She was found dead in her room days later. Her family says they haven't heard anything from Street Culture. Meanwhile, other staff are alleging discrimination, unfair labor practices, and safety violations are happening at the shelter. The FSIN said in a release that they want cultural knowledge training and accountability in youth facilities. A woman has died and a man has been arrested in Winnipeg following what police are calling a domestic-related assault. The woman and the man are from the Norway House Cree Nation in northern Manitoba. On Saturday morning, March 22nd at around 3:10 a.m., Winnipeg police were called to a home in the 1000 block of Selkirk Avenue. When they arrived, they found a 33-year-old woman with severe injuries. She was taken to hospital in critical condition and later died. Police have identified her as Stephanie Anderson Papanicus, who was living in Winnipeg since last year. The K-9 unit later found 40-year-old Jason Matthew Keem. He was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and remains in custody. A private investigator has taken over the case of Lonnie Chum. The 21-year-old woman was found injured after a hit and run on November 7th outside a house on Jabin Street in Moose Factory, Ontario. She was airlifted to hospital but later died. Her father, Robert Chum, has hired Ellen White, owner of Pulse Private Investigators in Toronto. White runs the Whereabouts Unknown initiative, a Facebook page and podcast dedicated to the families of missing or murdered loved ones. White told Timmins Today News that she and the Ontario Provincial Police received anonymous tips pointing to the same suspects and identifying two vehicles of interest. Robert Chum criticized police for not trying hard enough when they canvassed for witnesses in the area where the hit and run happened. The OPP and Anishinaabe police are still investigating. Anyone with information is asked to call Pulse Private Investigators at 289-975-0909. Well, we'd like to hear what you think about anything you see here or anything you'd like to see here. Here's how to get in touch. If you have a story you want to share, you can send us an email to news@aptn.ca. You can read and watch our stories by going to our website, aptnnews.ca. You can find us online on your favorite social media sites, including TikTok, YouTube, LinkedIn, and X. You can follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The Elver's fishery opened this past Saturday in Nova Scotia. Mi'kmaq fishermen have said they will not follow the rules that require them to use a federal app that logs the harvest of baby eels or elvers in the rivers in their territory. In a March 5th letter, Millbrook First Nation Chief Bob Glode told the Department of Fisheries and Oceans that his community will not use the app and that Millbrook does not recognize Ottawa's jurisdiction over the Mi'kmaq fishery. Gloat also referred to the 1999 Donald Marshall Jr. court decision that allows Mi'kmaq communities to earn a moderate livelihood from fishing. That ruling also says Canada has the right to regulate fisheries for conservation reasons. Chief Gloat insists his community will run its own sovereign regulatory system and believes the Elver stock is healthy. Elvers, or baby eels, are caught and then shipped live to Asia, with prices ranging from $1,500 to $5,000 per kilogram. The United States Department of the Interior says it plans to reinstate a program aimed at opening a sensitive area of the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge to oil and gas drilling. The nearly 20 million acre refuge is located in northeast Alaska. Its 1.5 million acre coastal plain acts as nursery grounds for the porcupine caribou herd. The plain is considered sacred by the Gwich'in peoples in northern Canada and Alaska. U.S. President Donald Trump passed a federal program during his first term in office, which required 2 mandated lease sales within the coastal plain. Both sales were a flop and generated virtually no interest from potential bidders. The Gwich'in Steering Committee said in a statement they oppose any development on the coastal plain and will continue to fight for the protection of the porcupine herd. It's day 3 in the federal election campaign, and Mark Carney was in Halifax. We'll bring you that and more still to come. Welcome back. On day 3 of the federal election campaign, Prime Minister Mark Carney stopped in Halifax at the Irving Shipyard, where he promised more investment in Canada's military. Hundreds of Irving Shipyard employees and Nova Scotia Liberal candidates stood behind the Prime Minister as he promised to rebuild, reinvest, and rearm the military. This includes increased surveillance capabilities of the Canadian Coast Guard to protect Canada's sovereignty. APTN News asked Carney if he would support Indigenous sovereignty because 3 Mi'kmaq First Nations announced last week that they are sovereign nations. And community members will assert their inherent rights to fish without federal authorization.
We will lay all that out. What I support is dialogue which balances Aboriginal rights, the realities of the fishery that works towards a sustainable fishery here in Nova Scotia, throughout Atlantic Canada, across this country.
Well, in about 5 weeks, Canadians will head to the polls for the 45th general election on April 28th. Fraser Needham's joining us now to tell us about some important info you'll need to keep in mind to vote and what's new for Indigenous voters. Fraser, thanks for being with us. For starters here, maybe let's run down some of the important dates to remember during this campaign period.
Right, there's a number. Of course, the election started on March 23rd, so we're in the campaign period. On April 9th, that's when the list of all the candidates running in your area will be available on the Elections Canada website. So if you go to the deadline for nominations, I think is 48 hours before that. So that's a good time if you're wondering who is actually running. Rather than searching around, you can just go directly to the Elections Canada website. April 11th, if you haven't received a voter registration card in the mail, or you can then go online and register online, so that's good to know that as well. April 18th is when the advance polls begin. Those usually run for 4 days, so April 19th to 20th, 21st. And April 22nd is the deadline to register to vote by mail. And April 28th is Election Day.
What pieces of identification do you need to have with you to vote?
Okay, well, in some cases you can use one, but in a lot you have to use 2. So if you have a government-issued ID with your photo and address on it, for example, your license, that's all you need. But that's what's in there are some other forms of government ID that are like that, but many, of course, don't have your address on it. So in that case, you would need something with your photo on it. And speaking of Indigenous voters, that could be sort of a band membership card, treaty card, Métis membership card. But you will also need something else with your address on it. That could be your voter registration card, utility bill maybe. And now sometimes, in First Nations, people may not have much correspondence, or they pick things up at the band office, so they might not have much with their address on it. In that case, you can actually get a letter of confirmation of your address from the First Nation, and I believe you can do that from whichever particular Métis Nation that you're registered with as well.
Are there any changes that Elections Canada has made this time around to try and engage Indigenous voters?
Yeah, the biggest one actually, and the Chief Electoral Officer brought it up, Stefan Perot, yesterday, and that's that they're actually they're going to have advance polls that will affect 400 Indigenous communities, and these are mainly in remote areas and things like that where there normally aren't advance polls, or it might be on before elections. So, and just to note, they may not be the normal 4 days, and they might not even be open the the regular 12 hours during those periods, but they will be there and available to voters, and they say they'll sort of work with communities to sort of provide the people that they need to do that. There's also increased use of languages at polling stations and election materials in Nunavut. It's been an issue there. Increased use of Indigenous languages in voting locations in Northwest Territories. They'll have an Indigenous Community Relations Officer that's helping with the campaign. There's also, it's been around before, but the Indigenous Elder and Youth program that they'll have Indigenous people helping at polling stations with different things and providing some language things as well. And there'll be voter information in 17 different Indigenous languages, some interpretation in Indigenous languages. And I should also mention there's a lot of job opportunities that happen with an election, and they're often, I think, fairly decent paying jobs. So anyone that's interested can go on to the Elections Canada website, find this out. There's actually an Indigenous electors page, and there are always different jobs to be done, either polling, or you could get involved with the sort of Indigenous Elder and Youth program if someone's interested in that.
Fraser, all important stuff to keep in mind. Appreciate you joining us here to talk about it.
Thanks very much for having me.
As we reported, the government of Saskatchewan unveiled their 2025-26 budget last week. It totals $284.9 million, up $30 million from last year. The allocation for Indigenous programs is also up by about $30 million, but the opposition says that's not enough. NDP MLA Leroy Laliberty is the opposition shadow minister for First Nations and Métis relations. For example, he says the $500,000 earmarked for highway repair means existing roads will remain unfixed. Laliberty also stressed the need for better funding for healthcare, transportation to urban centers, and mental health services, arguing the budget lacks equity for the North.
And it wasn't our people that created the division, it was this government that did it. And now our people are starting to see through that, and they're coming together, like I said, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, I tell you, because we have some smart people, and they know what they want. They know what the needs are because they're listening to their community members, and I'm there to support them, and so is my colleague, the MLA for Cumberland, because we both represent the whole North, which is a huge couple of ridings. And we really do care about our constituents.
Federal funding for a major project in Whitehorse was announced just days before the election. Details on that and more still to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. It's a sled dog village located near Tuktoyaktuk in the Northwest Territories. Thanks to Holly Carpenter for sharing this dog mushing team. Enjoying a clear day. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 8 in Fredericton and Charlottetown. -13 with snow in Kuujjuaq, 9 below in Nain. +5 with snow in Montreal, 0 in Val-d'Or. 4 above in Sault Ste. Marie, snow and +2 in North Bay. 8 in Thunder Bay, 5 in Sioux Lookout. -4 in God's Lake, 2 below with snow in Norway House. 9 above in Winnipeg, cloudy and +5 in Brandon. Cloudy and 4 in Regina, 7 in North Battleford. 4 in Meadow Lake, -4 in Buffalo Narrows. In northern Alberta, -4 in High Level, 2 below in Fort McMurray. +16 in Lethbridge, sunny and 14 in Medicine Hat. 16 in Vancouver, showers and 18 in Kamloops. 8 in Prince George, rain and 10 in Smithers. -14 in Old Crow, +3 in Whitehorse. -14 in Yellowknife, 13 below in Norman Wells. -23 in Sax Harbor and Paulatuck. -25 in Chesterfield, Whale Cove, and Baker Lake. -28 in Resolute, 11 below with snow in Iqaluit. The federal and territorial governments are injecting $75 million towards building a new convention center in Whitehorse. The feds will pitch in over $56 million for the project, while the territory will provide nearly $19 million. Federal funding was secured just days before Prime Minister Carney called a general election. The center will cost around $75 million to build. It will be owned by the Kwanlin First Nation and operated by its economic arm, Chuniquan. The center, named the Yukon Gathering Place, can hold up to 1,000 people and is expected to boost tourism. The center is slated to open in 2028. Well, we're sitting down with the executive producer of APTN Investigates on Face to Face tonight. Paul Barnsley has nearly 4 decades of journalism experience, and tonight he provides advice for people looking to get into journalism.
We treat people with a lot of respect, a lot of consideration here. And if you do that, word gets around. I tell my folks, you know, every day is an audition. People are watching. Powerful people with information that they'd like to share, but at great risk to themselves, to their careers, maybe their personal safety. They're looking for somebody they can trust to provide that information to. And if you're an reporter with great integrity and great compassion, you may win that sweepstake. You may be the one they come to and say, okay, here it is. You know, this is important. The world needs to know about this. So just work hard and lead with your heart.
And you can catch our entire interview with Paul in about 90 seconds from now. He's got lots of stories to tell. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Tuesday. For much more, you can visit our website, aptnnews.ca, and join Creason here tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time for your first look at the day's news. I'm Dennis Ward. Marcy Miigwech, thanks for being with us. Face to Face is up next. Have a great night.